So 67th Pearl of Wisdom, which is wonder. It's one of my favorites, wonder. And we'll see how the Pearl of Wisdom shows up. So the seven sparks that light up the sparkle of wonder, or wonderment. So the first one is, it's wholesome. So when you are in a state of wonderment, the experience is wholesome. Wholesome to me is an experience of full spectrum well-being. Regardless of where you are, what you're experiencing, what you're feeling, you still experience that vibe of well-being. So it's like, to me, full spectrum is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, and environmental. It's a full spectrum experience of well-being. And I remember, there's a body of work that I do with business leaders, and it's called Creating You as an Iconic Brand. And that there are 4 foundational pillars that we work with, and you'll remember that for yourself. And we each, when you work on that, you identify what is your brand promise and what are your core brand values for you as a person. So for me, what I'm sourcing in the world really is love of self. People being truly, madly, deeply in love with themselves. My brand promise is life's wow. And my brand values are colorful, wonderful, like full of wonder, with the lightness of being, miraculous, and divinely guided. Now, when I got this, when I developed this as my personal brand architecture, I really liked the full of wonder part. I was in Bali at the time. And at that particular time, it was quite very early on in my spiritual awakening journey. And if any of you heard my story or read it or heard me talk about it, when I went to Bali, there was a whole medley of collection of health issues that I had at the time. So physically, I was not in a state of wonderment at all. And mentally, there was a little bit of anxiety because I was making some big choices of really stopping my life in London and embarking on this journey where it was unpredictable. It was in a place that was beautiful and yet not something that my corporate mind would normally choose. And everything that occurred there was much more right mind driven, and Balinese people are very loving, very creative, much more right mind, emotion, heart led, as opposed to mind led. So it was a very different environment to what I would have felt comfortable in. And it was there that I became very clear that well-being is, you only have the experience of well-being when it is a full spectrum experience. Full spectrum is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, and environmental. So I automatically assumed that I wasn't going to experience full spectrum well-being because physically there were many things that were wrong. And I wasn't one who was going to take medication. I was just going to ride it through, however long it took. But I created this brand architecture and I started embracing my brand values. There's lots of color in Bali, no question about that. So it was really quite nice to actually experience physically the color that was there. And I thought, wow, if I'm actually experiencing what it feels like when I'm embodying my own core values, I'm going to apply that experience in a full spectrum way. So physically, yes, there were so many beautiful flowers. Green was greener than I'd ever seen. The clouds were really fluffy and very distinctly different than the blue sky on which they were resting. All of that. Physically, that was very rich. I could totally see all aspects of my brand values. Colorful, wonderful, divinely guided. Lightness of being, lots of butterflies, bees, bumblebees, all around where I was. And then I was curious to know, what does that actually mean mentally? If I'm doing a mental lay of the land and looking at the world, having embodied my brand values, colorful was like, okay, there's a mix of experiences and textures. Colorful, I couldn't quite lay my hand at the time, the first time I did it. Now I can totally experience what colorful feels like mentally. It just feels like, to me, it felt like rainbows, that experience of rainbow everywhere. I changed my diet as a result of that experience of rainbow. It became more about having rainbow foods on my plate and stuff, like really savoring that. So for me, mentally, it was more like, there was a sense of deep relaxation that enabled me to savor what was happening physically when I embodied my brand values. Emotionally is where I got that breakthrough of wholesomeness, of wonder. So emotionally, I started understanding that actually by being engaged, embodying my brand values, I took each one in turn. What does the emotion of colorful actually feel like in my body? And what I experienced was these different experiences that my body was having. Some parts feeling unwell, some in pain, some actually having that, heart open exuberance, that feeling of exhilaration through my cells as that very light spray of rain would fall on my body. I started experiencing that the emotion of each one of these in my body. But the one that gave me access to it all was the wholesome part of wonder. I experienced for the first time that in just a few minutes of engaging with the wonderment of where I was, I understood that the wonderful is full of wonder. And each thing has the fullness of wonder. So in my observation, and that's the wholesome part. We use wonderful just like that, but actually it's quite a deep experience, quite a deep experiential word. The world is full of wonder because you look everywhere, there's always something or the other there that, gives you that experience of wholesomeness. And when you observe it, it's as if it fills it with the vibration of wonder. That was pretty cool to get, And I started going into those parts of my body that were in pain and applying that wonder lens to those parts of the body. And noticing, despite the pain, despite the illness that I was in, there was the fact that I was able to detach myself from that, localize the pain. It didn't take over my entire experience of life. I didn't ignore it, so it didn't need to scream and stop me in my tracks. But I also saw that it was as if it was filling that that particular, like my ankle was a really big problem. And the shin of my right leg was a real problem. So I could feel that as I was filling it up with wonder, there was a lightness of being that was automatically being created. And I actually could walk with my feet on the ground as opposed to the special shoe that I had to wear when I first came in. And that feeling of the ground, I savored it because I hadn't done that for a while. And it was as if it filled me with wonder, what it feels like. And my ankle, which is where my focus was being filled with this promotion of health and well-being of my mind and my spirit. Boosted my morale, boosted my confidence. And it's as if I started feeling that vigor and vitality again. And it was this wholesome part of wonder that did it. I just started really loving, understanding why certain words, which are whole and complete in themselves, come together, like full and wonder, making wonderful. But actually, they enrich each other. Colorful is the same thing. Artful, the same thing. I really became very aware of engaging with the nuances of what we are presented with. It uplifted my spirit. I got to the understanding of, that there is a spirit of me. And if I'm disconnected from my spirit, I remain disconnected from the spirit of everything around me. And not only if I'm like imploding in whatever experience I might be having, I don't notice wonder outside of me. And I give myself permission to, be disrespectful to what's outside of me, or become unaware that I'm even doing that. So this examination of the wholesome part of wonder revealed to me that everything, your world, is your world. It begins with you and it ends with you. And you can enrich it and make it as wholesome as you choose to by your declaration. And you can, and by your examination. But know that you are the creator of your world. Because world is just is. What you're creating is your experience of living in this world. And nobody else can create that. Nobody else. So then using this wonder lens as a way of choosing to create my experiences of living in this world, right at the get-go, number one spark is wholesome. And it is such a wholesome spark. And it sparkles wonder everywhere, So I very strongly recommend when you do take it on, do it in a full spectrum way, experience what it feels like when you're looking at it with this wonder lens. What aspect of my physical presence feels healthy, feels integrated? Then look at your mental, emotional, spiritual. What does it feel like being connected to the spirit of you? And what does it even mean, this being in the midst of spirit of nature? That's where I got the okayness part. Trees have this innate vibe of okayness. And literally you feel that wrapping around of okayness as you're walking through the trees. And it was in this state of wonder, experiencing wholesomeness, and with this doing it in this way, I started walking. I was able to go out, and I even was able to visit the first time in Bali. And since then I've visited it many times. One of my favorite waterfalls there. And that's where I had that experience of that rainbow moment, where the sunlight just goes through the spray of the waterfall, and all you see is hundreds and hundreds of rainbows. I sometimes share this. So my brand personality is a butterfly through the rainbow waterfall. And it was there that I experienced it, where we could barely stand on our feet because the spray of the waterfall was so strong. And just as that light, the sunlight hit the spray, and it was filled with rainbows, you just saw butterflies going in and out of the spray. My God, we could barely stand. And the butterflies are going in and out of the rainbow. And what's the secret? Lightness of being. Where do you get the lightness of being? And that's a wholesome examination that revealed that. You get the lightness of being when you recognize and own that you are a soul being, having a human experience. Soul is light. It's eternal. Literally, in an instant, all lack goes away. Their heaviness disappears. You're limitless. Nothing, you're indestructible. And you're in a state of wonder. It is through the examination of the wholesome lens that I got, and you will get, the power of collaborative co-creation of coexistence. When you feel, and I was one of those people in those times, where I felt that if I had to get something done, I was the one who I had to rely on. And here, I was ill. I couldn't move very much. And using the wonder lens, I transformed my physical health and mental well-being, and emotional exuberance set in, and I reconnected to the spirit of me. Lightness of being was there, and I could really revel in how divinely guided we are. At that time, I would say it was divine guidance, that this whole idea of using wonder and understanding what it does, what does it actually spark up within us, was a divine guidance. And suddenly I realized that actually for me to experience life's wow, the only way that was going to occur was a collaborative co-creation of coexistence. In every way. Physically, I needed support of other human beings to actually be able to recuperate and recover fully. Within myself, I required the support of my cells, themselves choosing to step into a lightness of being and start to recover. Now, here's the other piece. This is in the context of physical well-being, right? I understood, and this applies to everyone, which is when you have a physical illness of any kind, it's as if you're loaded with the discomfort and pain, and we load ourselves up also sometimes with medication. So there are the chemicals that your body's also trying to process. So if you can imagine, that there used to be these Russian dolls that would go one into the other, into the other, into the other, right? And they would wobble, right? You would have 9 dolls, but they would wobble. And wherever you push them, they would always come back to the center. Our bodies are designed like that. So when you are not in this wholesome state, some part or the other is loaded. So you can imagine this Russian doll, where if you push it down, you're loading it, you remove your hand, it comes back. But if you actually keep your hand there, it can't come back. So regrouping is difficult. So when you are experiencing a physical ailment, there is load on there. with this, with the wonder lens, I was able to literally, as if bring that lightness of being, release the load. And that allowed my cells to return to the center. And they were able to recalibrate. And I would say, the particular, the diagnosis that was there, which was with my right ankle, was supposed to be something that just stayed with you for the rest of your life. The lower part of my right leg was completely discolored. And they said, well, you just have to live with this. And it is completely, there is no discoloration, it's completely recovered. It didn't recover immediately, but I certainly felt that lightness of being. It took many years for that discoloration to completely disappear. But that's because I kept removing the load. And the sparkles of wonder do that. They release the load. And number one is wholesome. So they remove the load in a wholesome way, where you start to feel whole and complete. The second spark. The second spark is open-hearted. It puts you in a state of the experience of open-hearted. Now, the vibration of open-hearted is warm and kind. Every word has, or every phrase has an innate vibration. The innate vibration of open-hearted is warm and kind. Now, because you are lighting up these sparks within you, when you experience the sparkles of wonder and you own them as your reality, and your journey of understanding what these sparkles are is something which gets you to understand that you are co-creating your experience of living your life. You're owning that, your own ability as a lead creator or lead co-creator of your life. That open-hearted feeling puts you in a state of warm and kind feelings towards yourself. And you know what that does? The should, need, have tos, must do disappears. They are big loading words. I should do this. I should not do this, more load. I have to, more load. I need to. And how we get ourselves up and go ahead and do anything is quite commendable, really. So when you're being warm and kind to yourself, and this is, remember I talked about when I do the 7, whatever it may be, 7 ways, 7 steps, now we talk about 7 sparks, I always say, when you're working through this, do it in this sequence, don't rush it. So you can imagine you getting to the space of really experiencing the open-hearted feeling, and you've gone through the wholesome experience already. You're now applying that open-hearted feeling to yourself, that warm and kindly feelings towards yourself. It literally puts you in this deep meditative zone, and you don't even have to close your eyes. You can be right in the center of everything that's going on, because you're experiencing everything that is happening without being consumed by it. You're in a state of creation. I always love to turn the volume up, especially when I'm working with these pearls of wisdom. So this warm, kindly feeling towards myself. I say, okay, I'm actually going to do it physically, where can I focus this warm and kindly feeling in my physical being? And when I first did that, I realized there were so many aspects of my physical being that I would go, and never mind, won't talk about that. Oh, this doesn't matter, just put on another layer or put a wrap on or whatever it might be. And it's one thing to do all of that because you really are, wanting to experience the fullness of the beauty of you. And it's another thing to put it on to hide something that you think shouldn't be there. That's not warm and kindly. So where is your attention? Your attention is on what shouldn't be there. You've already loaded yourself with the shouldn'ts. So you can imagine you're not even in your center of gravity, isn't even in the right place. And you're walking around off center, compensating for it. Your posture is odd. It doesn't bring out the fullness of the beauty of you, just in the physical side. And mentally, you're preoccupied. There's that restlessness or there's some form of angst that's there. So anything that happens that might be anxiety-provoking multiplies that. So that it starts to diminish the experience of wonder. The heart starts to close down a bit. Emotionally, we step into conversations, not being very clear. We're not going to be vulnerable or open-heartedly share ourselves because part of us is shut off. There's that mental angst that's there as an undertone. We actually are not fully present in conversations or interactions. We are looking at or engaging with, how am I going to respond to this? Working out that conversation in our head and losing the thread of what is actually being communicated to us. And then when we speak what we speak and it is disconnected, we are ignored, we give meaning to it, the spiritedness of us diminishes. And now we are in meaning land, which is a meaning land. It's not a land of wonder. You're in the matrix. And your social dynamics are much more about protecting yourself, shielding yourself. You start developing all sorts of ideas and thoughts about the world and certain people and certain lifestyles. And your environment starts to reflect that, keeping you more and more and more disconnected from the aliveness that is possible when you live in this land of wonder. Wholesomeness disappears. You're now navigating through landmines of meaning-related situations or perceived situations that you are creating. And you start having the experiences. And of course, you then don't believe that you've created it. It's all the outside world that is doing this to you, further depleting your own power. Heart shuts off even more strongly until you just lose all connection to your emotions. And you see how fast it actually spins, It was quite a revelation when I did this with the benefit of hindsight analysis. I realized that, okay, this is where the open-heartedness shut off. And it began with me stopping forcibly, in some ways, the warm and kindly feeling towards myself. That's where it began. and I got lost in the world outside of me. The good news is anything that you've created, which is only powered by the power of your mind and thought, you can return to the lightness of being by reconnecting to the knowingness that you are a soul being. That is the spirit of you. There is so much that we are gifted with in terms of nature, that it is there to support us and help us remain connected to the spirit of us. So the second spark is open-hearted. The third one is novel, something that has never been seen. And, as I'm describing to you what was going on with me at a health level, it literally, just me getting rid of cellulitis completely to such an extent that even the discoloration, all that is gone. And I still have one of the, I'm still significantly overweight. So there are lots of conditions that the medical profession puts to being overweight. One of them would be, the blood supply, the blood sugar, and all that stuff, which would have prevented the discoloration of my feet and the shin part to still be there. It's not there anymore. Something that has never been seen has occurred. And I'm just using a very physical example, and if you then look at, right, I'm in the state of wonder, I'm feeling open-hearted, I've got that warm, kindly feeling towards me. Let's look at my lay of the land. Physically, what has happened that's never been seen before? What's there right now that I might never have noticed before? I mean, it was amazing. When I took this on, I was in Bali, so okay, and some of the vistas were different than what we would see in cities. But I noticed, that in the rice fields, there's a particular time where they flood the rice fields with water. So I'm standing on my balcony and I'm looking out, and I always admired the clouds in Bali. They're just so wonderful and fluffy. And I'm looking up at the sky and feeling so good, and then I'm looking down and I see the sky on the ground. I'm like, wow, what is that? It's like exactly the same cloud formations on the ground. Well, that's because the reflection was on this water that was on top of these rice fields. So it's as if you're in this 360-degree dome-like experience surrounded by blue skies and fluffy clouds. Something I'd never seen before. But because I was looking for novel, that was the intention. I said, okay, show me what's there that I've never seen. That'll just sparkle, really sparkle wonder in me. I didn't know what to expect. And this was like, wow. And literally one thing leads to another always, and you start noticing many other things that you might never have noticed before. So, that was physical. And then you look at the mental part. I mean, in an instant, you can transform your mood in an instant. So that actually for me, once I understood that, I just took the fear out of, feeling upset about something. My whole day wasn't going to be damaged by that. I can experience upset. I can acknowledge I'm upset about something. And I know I can be in that wonderment of, wow, I'm allowing myself to experience the fullness of upset, and it disappears by itself. It doesn't return. And it's not just me. You can do it for yourself. We half acknowledge, and therefore we half experience what we are meant to experience in that moment. Acknowledge and experience fully, and it's gone. Creating the space for something more and something new to occur. And when you're in a state of wonderment, then it's those sparkles that you start seeing again and again and again. So this was a fun exercise, you know. You can do a benefit of hindsight exercise and really look at your life physically and search what's new that I've not seen before. You know, mentally, what's new that I've not seen before? Emotionally. When I embarked on these 7 sparks that sparkle the vibe of wonder, I felt quite desperate wanting to reconnect with feeling my emotions again. That's where it began for me. Because I realized that nothing annoyed me. I just didn't get angry, but I also didn't experience joy fully. So I was so almost desperate to reconnect to my emotions. So the wonder 7 sparks sparkled wonderment and reconnected to that emotional side of me. It was quite wonderful to notice that different emotions actually show up differently in how I feel in my body. And when you connect to that level of nuance, you can recreate anything. So something new that has never been seen. I started noticing that in my social dynamics, my language. I noticed that actually I started smiling. Before I had trained myself to not smile. I knew what it felt like having that stiff upper lip. So nobody ever knew how you were feeling. And that very cold stare. Oh my God. Linda, I was an actress without knowing I was one. So desperately wanting to project that as me. And it just wasn't cool, really. It wasn't me at all. But even the realization in doing this novel examination of, the 7 sparks of wonder was quite a revelation to realize, okay, I created that type of a personality. It's not me. And I gave permission to experience different experiences. The 4th one is an interesting word. And I would never associate it with wonder, but I never edit whatever comes through. And it's a word called dexterous. Dexterous to me is, being someone who's really clever at handling a crisis. They have some special physical, mental skill. There's a quickness. And there is a sense of grace. And it's quite artful to be dexterous. So doing the lay of the land here, because when I ask you to do the lay of the land in these pearls of wisdom, I'm really anchoring that particular aspect of what we are working with. So here, by doing a lay of the land, I say to you, just pick some big moments in your life and look at crises particularly. Look at, a big crisis, 1 or 2 crises. And I always look at work, home, personal, family, society, that I look at all of those type of things. And then I go in and look at, well, where was I clever at handling this? What actually happened? What was the situation? What got it to turn into a crisis? Because how else am I going to learn to ensure that things don't become a crisis in the future? And what was that physical or mental skill? And that quickness with which I was able to turn this around. What did I do to presence grace? And there's one particular situation that I was looking at when I was doing this work. It was a time when, my son was, he experimented with cannabis actually. And he was one of these teenagers that was allergic to it. So he got psychosis. I didn't even know that he was experimenting with it. I didn't know what psychosis was either, except I knew that my son, something had changed. And he started getting really anxious because he was just telling me what he was seeing. It was like everything is way bigger than it is, and all sorts of descriptions of what was there in front of him, which was distinctly worrisome because it wasn't what I was seeing. I believe I was dexterous in how I handled that situation. It was a crisis. And he did go to a psychiatrist, and they prescribed some psychiatric medication. He was only 15, so his brain reacted very strongly, very fast. First week, it was like I had my child back. The old Sai was back. And after a week, it was like he was pacing up and down. He was having panic attacks. And he just kept saying, my brain's messed up, my brain's messed up. And I just wanted him to stop. And the psychiatrist said, no, this is strong medication. You can't stop it. The cycle has begun. It could just, it could damage him. He could become like a vegetable if you stop this medication. You have to continue with it for 6 months. And every day felt so heavy. So in doing this examination with the benefit of hindsight, what I chose was to look for a nutritionist so I could give him nutritious food to combat the effect of this medication, because I didn't want my son to, he was only 15, I didn't want the rest of his life to be damaged. So if the psychiatrist is saying he's going to become a vegetable, I didn't want that. And in that hunt for a nutritionist, I found just the perfect person. And she educated me on what was actually being medicated to him and worked with me to create a strategy where we used nutrition and, certain supplementation to have him wean off that medication and completely return to perfect health. And she was the one who was resolved this is going to happen. As a mother, I was panicking left, right, and center every time. My son showed any of the symptoms, and which was happening a lot. What I did do, this is where the physical and mental skill and quickness came in, was we were at the American film market, because I was in the movie business at the time. And I arrived in LA, we are in the hotel room, and I'm seeing my son just literally falling apart. I couldn't possibly go to any of the film parties. I just stayed there in the room. My partner went to all the obligations that we had as film producers. And I just sat down on the bed and talked to him and to Sai. I said, look, if you're open to it, and if you're willing to give it a go, I will. And we were on our way to Hawaii, and we were going to be in Hawaii for 5 weeks after AFM. I said, I will, and I will just do whatever Vani, our nutritionist, has told us to do. But it does mean a different diet. It does mean a very specific regime, and it does mean no salt. And I'm happy to eat what you eat. And he said to me, yeah, let's do it, Mom. But I don't want you to eat what I eat, because that will just make me feel guilty. but I'm willing to do it for myself, and let's do it, which we did. Within 3 weeks, we were actually down to a very tiny, I just tapered the medication, so from 1.5, it went to 1 to half. But initially it was like the first week and the second week. And then we experimented with reducing it every 2 days until by the end of the 3rd week, he was not taking any of it. All the panic attacks disappeared. But there was still sufficient readjustment of his nerves that was done, which actually took about 8 or 9 months to finally completely clear. But the dexterous approach, the dexterousness was very, very vividly visible there. And if I hadn't been graceful, if I had forced him, he might never have done anything about it. And it was artful, absolutely. And in art, if you're an artist, which I have become an artist, you notice every step of the way, what's emerging out of your art. So here I was noticing. I started experimenting with different ways of cooking the food that I was cooking for him. And how it's amazing how synchronicities come together to support us. We were staying on the North Shore in Oahu, and there was a whole collection of recipes and certain herbs. And it was like a serious herbalist who would know all that. It just so happened that there was a tiny organic store. The owner of that store was a herbalist himself. So most of the things he didn't have in his store, but because he knew what they did, he went and got them, and he came home and taught me how to work with these. I wouldn't even know who to go and ask and what I would ask for. But it came from resolve, yes. I was open-hearted. I was being warm and kind to myself, not beating myself as a mom for having allowed this situation to occur, which I did go through, that feeling of guilt and shame and all that. But that was not going to help my son. It wasn't helping me. It wasn't helping a solution that we could create together. So this is a really powerful one, and it's a deep one to engage with. Take a crisis and look at where you were dexterous in handling it. It anchors that remembrance, and you get into a space of knowing that whatever occurs in an artful, graceful way, you already know you have that very special physical and mental skill to very cleverly apply it to turn around any crisis. The 5th one, I always start losing track of time. The 5th one is eclectic. This is the spark of eclectic. The 7th spark is eclectic. And it's as if when you're in the space of wonder, you start deriving ideas, style, creativity is rampant. And you're very open to being inspired from diverse range of sources. You are in collaborative co-creation, undoubtedly. I mean, it was interesting, just since I talked about my son here, when we got back from Hawaii, it was fabulous to see how much he had improved. It was time for some of the heavy metal stuff that was in his body as a result of the medication and how the chemical reactions had taken place for him to cause during the psychosis period and his recovery from it. That the nutritionist said the person I would send him to is this amazing Japanese doctor. And she said, I met him in Japan, and I met him where was some town in Japan, she said. And she said, well, I'll reach out to him and see. So I said, I'll go with Sai there. It's fine. Tell me where it is. So, well, you might have to stay there for, a month to 6 weeks. I will do that if that's what's going to help. She reaches out to him, and the guy's actually visiting the Japan center the next week. And he's there for 3 months. It was amazing. I mean, now when I think about it, and really, I was not spiritually awakened at the time. I really was this corporate executive. So everything just needed to be done and accomplished, and so we could move on from there. I was in that space. I wouldn't necessarily have gone for these diverse range of sources. But I did develop a trust in her, and I stayed in my resolve that my son was going to recover fully and really live his life and bring out his true potential. I stayed stationed in that. And therefore, I allowed myself to receive these synchronicities and act on it. So the eclectic part occurred just because of my resolve. And so this is with the benefit of hindsight, I discovered that, this piece was very active, even though I didn't think I was necessarily doing it myself. The fact that I had someone I trusted and I allowed her to go look at broad and diverse range of sources for fulfilling my intention, it occurred. Now, when you do this benefit of hindsight, going back in time and looking at what's happening, you're actually bringing that remembrance back. And you're able to use that prowess of you in other situations as your life unfolds. The sixth spark is radiant and resilient. The sixth spark that really illuminates the sparkle of wonder, radiant and resilient. It won't take you long to experience the radiance and resilience of living your life when you live it with this wonder lens. You're sending out your light. You're sending out your light. You're shining and glowing brightly that which you're acknowledging as wonderful. And in doing so, you are actually enriching the radiance of you. It enables you to have that resilience to overcome anything that might come in the way of you fulfilling what you're here to fulfill. So doing the lay of the land on this is so much fun. When you look at different things that might have gone on in your life or a situation that you may be dealing with right now and apply the radiant and resilience examination to it, you're illuminating yourself with every step. And you start noticing how you start glowing brightly. And you get to a knowing that you can withstand and recover quickly from any situation, whatever it may be. It brings that knowingness, the confidence and courage that comes from a state of knowing that you have what it takes to withstand or recover quickly from any condition. Brings that spring in your step, that lightness of being. Anchor it in reality by doing that examination. And again, do it in a full spectrum way. Take a situation physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially, and environmentally, what was going on. And see how the radiance was popping up. The fact that that situation's already occurred and here you are, there's much to be learned from our own life that can continue to enrich us. And the seventh spark is scrupulous. Scrupulous being careful, thorough, and extremely attentive to details. So as you make your way through the 7 sparks that make up that sparkle of wonder, you've already seen me talk about it today. You are scrupulous in your examination by being really thorough and extremely attentive to details. And this is the secret. This extreme attention to detail is the secret that has supported me in fulfilling my desire to only do 0.02% to have 100% impact. If you are not having that attention to detail, you land up, not doing too much. And the impact of that is disproportionate to the amount of energy you're giving out. But working your way through these 7 sparks of wonder gives you that unique power and that unique experience, and it lands as a knowing where you just have to, whatever requires to be accomplished, you can find that 0.02% that is yours to do. And everything gets put in place and accomplished. So these are the 7 sparks that constitute or make up the sparkle of wonder: wholesome, open-hearted, novel, dexterous, eclectic, radiant and resilient, and scrupulous. Over to you, Dea, to complete.
Wow, Mynoo, thank you. What words you come up with. It's always so delightful that, what is Mynoo going to I just have to sit with this. This is really cool. I can really relate to it. And I imagine we all can. And the more we delve into it, the more sparkles we'll have in our life. So thank you so much for sharing this. I'm looking forward to really utilizing this and getting more sparkly and more radiant and everything else. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you again next week. Thank you. Enjoy the journey with the sparks of wonder. Bye-bye.
Thank you.